our repeater in Wallingford. Access is via 147.360 with a plus offset and no PL tone. Echolink access is available on the W1NRG-R node and also online via Zoom. The link can be found on both the Meriden Amateur Radio Club and Middlesex Amateur Radio Society Facebook pages. I would probably point everyone toward the Meriden Amateur Radio Club page because our Facebook page probably has the wrong, by ours I mean Middlesex Amateur Radio Society, probably has the wrong link. The meeting password when prompted is 123456. Again, the password for the meeting is 123456. This net takes place bi-weekly. The next net will be on January 21st at 7:30 p.m. James AB1DQ will be talking about mobile HF installations, so please be sure to mark your calendars. For tonight's net, I will first be taking radio check-ins. Please give your call, name, and location. There is a high probability that the calls for those check-ins will be new to me, so slow and phonetically will help me out. And if I have missed you or have your call sign wrong, please check in again. Priority will be given to Echolink and mobile stations. So please only Echolink and mobile stations call now. All right, nothing heard. This is November Uniform 1 Uniform. All stations who would like to check into tonight's Meriden Amateur Radio Club TechNet, please call now.
W1KKF.
All right, so far we have net recognizing as N1ZN, K1RCT, and K1JCF. Are there any other stations wishing to check into tonight's TechNet? Please call now.
W1KKF, Bill Wallingford.
All right, we're going to hold up right there. Net recognizes K1LYP, AB1DQ, N1BRL, W1DQ, N1LES, W1KKF, N1GNV, and KE1AV. Additional stations, or if I have missed your call or gotten it wrong, please call now. Okay, NetRight recognizes KC1NXP. And Bob, I actually got your call right in my head and I wrote it wrong with a V. So it's KE1AU. Apologies for that. So I'm gonna give another call out to see if there's any further check-ins on the radio for this Meriden Amateur Radio Club TechNet for this January 7th, 2021 before we get to the presentation. Please call now. K1 RCT, go ahead with the announcement. Awesome. Thank you very much, K1 RCT. So for anyone who's on the VHF, this presentation will be a little bit easier to follow if you're on the Zoom meeting because there are PowerPoints to go along with it, but I will try to describe what's on the screen as best I possibly can. So without, I guess, before I start, just throw out there to see if there's any questions again, before we start this presentation about the simulcast with Zoom and this repeater. All right, nothing heard. We're going to begin the presentation. So I'm going to thank the Meriden Amateur Radio Club for allowing me the opportunity to present tonight. I come from the Middlesex Amateur Radio Society, who is a club that we're trying to get more synergies going on, both the Meriden Club and the Middlesex Amateur Radio Club with other clubs in Connecticut. So this is a good first step. And a little bit about me before we begin. I have been a ham for just over 2 years now. I upgraded to extra sometime last year, and I've gone through 3 calls now. So NU1U is where I'm going to stick, and hopefully that's where you guys will all recognize me when I hear you on the air. So the topic tonight is digital mobile radio, DMR, and the reason why I made a DMR presentation, and this is actually a rehash of a presentation that I gave to our club probably about a year ago, is because our club utilizes DMR for one of our nets. And I knew nothing about DMR when I joined the club. And I didn't know about DMR during a lot of my time with the club, and that made it difficult to join the DMR nets. So what I did was I asked some of the club members about DMR, and I had one fellow, N1 PFD, who tried like heck to explain it to me, and I just wasn't getting it. So what I thought is I'd ask some other folks, and they explained to me, how you needed a code plug and get a DMR radio, and even that still intimidated me. So what I did is I did a lot of research to try and figure out what DMR actually was, and what came of it is this presentation. So to start off, I'm going to give shout outs to all of the different resources that I used to come up with this presentation. The biggest contributor would be Michael Martin's KB9VBR. For those of you that don't know, he is on YouTube, and he gave a great presentation. In fact, half of this presentation is pretty much lifted from his presentation about digital mobile radios. Then there's also some other websites. DMRfordummies.com is one place where you can learn about DMR. Ham Radio 2.0 another great YouTube channel. Matt K0LWC has a YouTube channel, and he talked about hotspots, which is a part of DMR, and we will get into that. There's a lot to DMR, and well, before I even get into that, last shout out to Ham Radio Concepts, which shows me how to program a hotspot using Pi-Star software on that hotspot. All right, so this is broken into two sections. We have all of the technical stuff about understanding DMR, and then the actual using of the DMR. So to start things off, we need to understand what DMR is. So this is a building TechNet. As I go into one thing, it's going to build to the next thing, going to build to the next thing. So you'll definitely want to pay attention as we go along, or else you will get lost. I'm going to try and keep it slow. I'm going to try and stop and ask for questions. So I would say buckle up. We're about to begin. All right, so what's the difference between analog and digital radio? Analog radio, you're taking, well, in a repeater situation, you have your HT or your base station, whatever radio you're using to communicate with the repeater, and you're taking your analog signal, it's going out over your frequency that you're transmitting on, and then being repeated on another frequency to everybody else. It's an analog signal, you're hearing what is going out over the airwaves. When you're using a digital signal in ham radio, what's happening is that your radio or your computer, or whatever device it happens to be, is converting signals into ones and zeros that are going out over the air. So it's going to sound a lot like an old school modem with all the pitches that are changing, and humans can't understand it, but computers can. So what's happening is your radio is taking your voice in DMR and it's translating it into computer speak, sending it up to the repeater. The repeater is then repeating that computer speak out to, on the air, to other radios that can understand that computer speak. So what you get out of that is a much better signal to noise ratio of being able to pull things out of static. So essentially you're getting a better range out of digital radio. When you're transmitting analog, and as a human, you have to listen and try and understand what the other side is saying. With digital radio, when it converts your voice into the computer speak, the computer's sending it out. Then the computer is receiving, another computer is receiving it. Computer can do error correction, and it can hear over the noise a whole lot better than a human can. It's sort of like CW. Those dits and das that you can hear with your ear better, basically the same thing, except computers are just much better at doing it. So the difference between analog and digital is with analog, you're sending out your voice, no translation other than it's going out over the frequency and electromagnetic waves. With digital, you're first converting your voice into something that is computer speak, and then a computer is retranslating it on the other side so that you get the audio that comes out of it. So I'm going to pause there, see if there's any questions about what I just talked about, analog versus digital. Awesome. So other than the negative confirmation, I didn't hear anything else. So we are going to move on. Going to kind of move a little bit fast through some of this because it's somewhat unimportant. DMR is a standard. ETSI has published a worldwide standard. It uses TDMA, which is time division multiple access. There's a codec that goes along with it, which is the AMBE+2 codec, and the DMR standard supports data applications like text, email, and GPS. All right, so DMR, it's a standard used by computers and radios. Moving on. There are different tiers of DMR. There's tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Again, somewhat unimportant. You're going to want to buy a tier 2 radio. I don't know if there is a tier 3 radio or repeater system out yet. Last I checked, which was a year-ish ago, nothing really supported tier 3. So the differences between 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 uses only one slot of the TDMA, which we will get into, and it's simplex. It's radio to radio only. Tier 2 uses 2 slots of the TDMA. Again, we're going to get into that, so don't worry about that right now. It uses a repeater or simplex, and then whatever IP site connect is. Again, getting these slides from some of the other folks, that I just left it in there for your reference. You can totally go and check out what IP site connect is. So anyway, kind of unimportant, but tier 2 is the type of radio you want to get, and most radios nowadays will support repeaters, tier 2 and 2-slot TDMA. Okay, here's where we want to start paying attention. With DMR, you essentially have 2 repeaters in one. There are 2 channels that you can get out of one frequency. So because of the way that DMR works, there's something called a time slot. And there are 2 time slots that every frequency uses. The TDMA cycle is 60 milliseconds long. And it has 2 time slots that are 30 milliseconds apiece. So on a given frequency to a repeater, you have 2 time slots. One time slot will not interfere with another time slot because it's being transmit at a different time. So I'm going to pause for the repeater here. Okay, so we have 2 time slots on a repeater or a given frequency if you're using simplex. How do you communicate? So basically, if you are using time slot 1, and you want to communicate with another radio on time slot 1, they have to be listening and transmitting on time slot 1. Makes sense. Same deal with time slot 2. If you're on time slot 2 and you want to transmit to a radio on time slot 2, you both need to be on time slot 2. Same frequency, no problem. You're not going to interfere with each other. Okay? So what happens if you're on time slot 1 and someone else is on time slot 2? And you want to talk to each other? It's not really going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen well. It can if you're monitoring both time slots. There's not really a good reason to monitor both time slots, but I will get into that as well. So, big important concept here. DMR uses 2 time slots, which allows 1 repeater to essentially act as 2 repeaters. So I'm going to pause and make sure that everybody has that understood before we move on. Are there any questions? All right, awesome. So moving on. Another benefit to this standard is the fact that it uses up less channel bandwidth when you're transmitting. So typical FM transmissions on traditional analog are 25 kilohertz wide. DMR uses half that, uses 12.5 kilohertz channel bandwidth. So you're already seeing some benefits with the fact that you can get more DMR channels in your band versus traditional analog. So there's a benefit to using DMR over analog. So this chart that I'm showing on the Zoom meeting is showing the differences between some different frequencies and ways of communication on the band that you're trying to use. So VHF, let me slow down here. FM wideband is about double the size of what we're looking at for FM narrowband. So 25 kilohertz versus 12.5 kilohertz. Then you have 2 digital modes showed up on the screen. One is DMR and one is D star. Okay, we're not talking about D star here. We're just talking about DMR. but essentially D-Star and DMR are using the same amount of frequency if you're using two time slots with DMR and two frequencies on D-Star, because D-Star takes up 6.25 kilohertz and DMR takes up 12.5 kilohertz. So because there's two transmissions going on in those 12.5 kilohertz band versus D-Star, which can have two different frequencies running in a 12.5 kilohertz chunk, you're essentially getting the same benefits, just in a different fashion using DMR versus D-Star. So that's just for comparison, nothing really to worry about there. Again, for those that are on the Zoom meeting, we're seeing the difference between time division, multiple access, and frequency division, multiple access. So essentially what we see is TDMA, which is time slot 1 transmits, then time slot 2 transmits, then time slot 1 transmits, then time slot 2 transmits over time. Whereas the frequency division picture, there's two channels that are going at the exact same time, dividing the frequency. So it just shows the difference between TDMA and FDMA. All right, so one last pause before we go into DMR terminology. Right now, you should know how DMR fundamentally works, going to a repeater and how it uses time slots and the bandwidth usage. So pause there. Okay, again, negative confirmation that there's questions, or positive confirmation there's no questions, however you want to look at it. We're going to go through all this DMR terminology. Again, this builds, so try and pay attention as we go through all of what we have on the screen here. We're going to talk about DMR ID, talk groups. We've already talked about time slot, but we're going to go over it again. Color code, and then finally a code plug. Okay, so to get on DMR, you will want a DMR ID. Having a call sign is not enough. You need to actually get yourself a number that recognizes you on the DMR network. So in most cases, you probably only need a single ID to get onto the DMR network, and you can have multiple radios that have the same DMR ID. You don't want to use them all at the same time, but you're one person and you're using your radio to get on the DMR network. So in order to do that, you need to go to www.radioid.net. Again, that's www.radioid.net. In order to register yourself, you will need a call sign, and you will need your official copy of your FCC license. So you need to get that official copy of the FCC license, upload it to the site, and you will get yourself a DMR ID. Okay, moving on. So once you get your DMR ID, what's nice about using DMR both on repeaters and hotspot is this thing called a talk group. So you have, starting off, the frequency you're transmitting on, then you have your time slots, but now you also have this thing called a talk group, which is essentially a room, so that you can talk to other people that are in the same room. So it's a method of organizing radio traffic on a DMR network. The talk group can differentiate countries, states, regions, special interests. Really, a talk group can be assigned to anything. So it could be the Connecticut talk group. It could be a region inside of Connecticut's talk group. It could be the East Hampton talk group. It could be the local Friday night club talk group. It could be whatever talk group you want to be. It could be the Meriden Amateur Radio Club talk group. So talk groups are just a way of making sure that you are in the same room as everybody else that's talking to on that repeater and on that time slot. So it's the equivalent to a system fusion room or a D-star reflector. The talk group is going to be a number, and that number you program into your radio so that when you key up on your radio, you're on the right frequency, you're on the right time slot, and you're in the right talk group. So in order to talk to another radio, you need same repeater, same talk group, and same time slot, okay? So there can be multiple talk groups on the same time slot. So I'm going to pause there just to see if there's any questions, because that might get a little bit confusing. Okay, awesome. So moving on, we already talked about time slots, but here's the deal with time slot. It's going to use one of the two voice channels in your 12.5 kilohertz data stream, and the DMR repeater can have two conversations going at once. So it's essentially like two repeaters. You have time slot 1 and time slot 2. And then whoever owns the repeater can assign certain talk groups. So we'll show you what talk groups Connecticut uses later, but just know that in order to talk on that repeater, you need the frequency, you need the time slot, the correct time slot, and you need whatever talk group you want to talk on. So you could be talking on a time slot that has multiple talk groups, and if someone's talking on a different talk group, they're taking up that frequency, they're taking up that time slot, but they're not in your talk group. You're going to interfere with each other, okay? So there can be multiple talk groups per time slot, and that can be a problem. The way to get around that is radios can use something called promiscuous mode or digital monitor mode. So if you use promiscuous mode or digital monitor mode, you can essentially tune your radio so that it can hear any talk group on that time slot. And that is something that's desired when you're using your radio, so that even if somebody is not in your talk group, but using your time slot or the time slot you want to use, you understand why you can't use the repeater. It's because somebody else is keyed up. But if by default you do not have promiscuous mode and you do not have digital monitor mode on, you will not hear someone in another talk group on your same time slot. That'll be a problem. So when you get to using DMR, just remember promiscuous mode on your time slot is what you want configured. You can do promiscuous mode on both time slots, but really who cares about the other time slot because you're not using it, okay? I'll pause there for any questions. Okay, so for those that are on Zoom, I'm going to repeat the question. The question was essentially, what were the 3 conditions in order to get on the repeater? And I'm actually going to hold off on answering that question because there's 4. We're not done yet, okay? But as far as the 3 that I've talked about so far, you got to be on the right frequency for the repeater, you have to be on the right time slot for the repeater, and you have to be on at least one of the talk groups in that time slot. So those are the 3 conditions: frequency, time slot, and talk group, okay? So now we're going to get to the last piece, which is the color code, okay? Color code isn't that difficult to understand. In the analog world, the color code is essentially the CTCSS tone. It's so that the repeater knows that when you're keying up on that frequency, you're using that talk, you're using that time slot, you're using that talk group, you're actually talking to that repeater. So think color code is the same thing as a PL tone, okay? So that's basically just different wording for the same thing. So tone, color code, it's so that the repeater understands that you're talking to it, tries to minimize interference. So now we have the 4 things that you should have programmed into your radio in order to access a repeater, okay? You need the frequency of the repeater, you need the time slot that you want to talk on, you want the correct talk group in that time slot, and you want the correct color code, okay? Later on in the presentation, I'm going to show you the programming for the Connecticut DMR repeaters, and it should help with this all sinking in, okay? So we have gotten to all of the things you need to do to get on a repeater. Final step here, final terminology that we have is code plug. So what is a code plug? Code plug is the programming for the radio. So when you're programming your analog radio, it's kind of doing the same thing. You can either use the computer or you can use the face of the radio. I rarely use the face of the radio, even when configuring an analog radio. It's a little bit more difficult to get the hang of making a code plug inside of a DMR radio because you have a few more things to consider. You have, again, the frequency, the time slot, the talk group, and the color code. All those have to be correct in order for you to get onto the repeater. So now, when you're programming a code plug, you have to do the repeater, again, the frequency of the repeater, all that stuff, all right? Each repeater can have multiple talk groups per time slot. So every repeater could potentially have 10, 15, 20, 30 lines inside of your programming software to access just one repeater. And we got a lot in the state of Connecticut, okay? That doesn't even include hotspots. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's what a code plug is. It's the programming for your radio. All right, some DMR networks. There's Brandmeister, which is the largest DMR network, and it bridges to Motorola and non-Motorola DMR repeaters, and it has wide MMDVM support. MMDVM is hotspots, so you can connect DMR hotspots to your to Brandmeister network. TGIF, we had one of our club members, KC1JDP, turn me on to TGIF. It's another online network that you can, DMR network that you can connect your hotspot to. DMR Marc, it bridges Motorola repeaters and it's got limited MMDVM support. We have DMR Plus, which bridges Motorola and Hytera repeaters, and it partners with DMR Marc. And then you can have your own C-Bridge network. So the state of Connecticut has its own C-Bridge, and it's a local server that connects a network of repeaters. There are more. This isn't comprehensive, but this is just an example of some of the networks that DMR supports, or it has been created via DMR. Okay, so what do you need in order to get connected to this cool DMR technology? You need a radio. So starting off, DMR handhelds. They are typically $75 and up, and they go in the range average of $150 to $225. The different models are TYT, Anytone, Motorola, and et cetera, et cetera. And most models do support both digital and analog dual band, so UHF, VHF, 70 centimeter 2 meter. So I don't really want to be that guy that says what radio to get. In Connecticut, the DMR, the CT Aries website for DMR has code plugs on the website. And one of the code plugs happened to be for the Anytone 878. And the Anytone 878 by far is the most popular radio in our club. The reason why a radio might get popular inside of a club or a state or a group of folks is because of that code plug. So you can program a code plug from scratch, and it might take you a really long time. Or you can just ask another ham, hey, what radio do you have? Can I have your code plug? And that's going to get you a lot of time save. So you can get other model radios, again, KC1, JDP. He had, I believe, an Alinco, and the code plug software looked almost identical, or probably was identical to the Anytone that I used to program my radio. I think it was cheaper. I don't know if the code plugs can be shared though. I've never tried that. So that's really the reason why the 878 is most popular for our club. So you can also get mobile DMR radios. The one shown here, I believe, is another Anytone 578. I really hope I'm getting the numbers right. But anyway, you can Google, and that's probably the most popular, again, DMR radio that I know out there. There's other models and other manufacturers that make DMR radios. And same deal, dual band with analog support as well. Okay, go ahead with the chat question.
Yeah, Ant, I have a question. Can you hear me? I guess not.
Okay, so question recognized from John B. This is November Uniform 1 uniform, and the question was, do you need separate IDs for each network? No. For DMR, you only need one ID. It's shared among all the networks. It's essentially what identifies you to other DMR users, not just the network. So if you go to radioid.net, you can actually do a database dump. And if your radio has enough memory, you can upload all those DMR IDs to your radio, so that when someone keys up and you see their DMR ID on the radio, not only do you see the DMR ID, you see all the information about the ham you're talking to, call sign, name, location, all that stuff comes down with the database. So when you go to radioid.net and you get the one DMR ID, you can program it on all your radios, works on every DMR network. So that's the answer to that question. Are there any further questions?
Yeah, this is K1LHO. Mike, I just have a question. What happened to Hose Brandmeister?
Doesn't sound like he can hear us.
Okay, so we're waiting for questions in chat. Are there any other questions that have come through in chat?
This is K1LHO. Do you hear me?
Mike, he is not listening to chat. He's only listening on a repeater. You have to type it in chat.
So for those that are on Zoom, I actually have the Zoom turned off. So I'm hearing everything only through the repeater. So it needs to be relayed through the chat in the Zoom meeting. Okay, so it looks like we actually have K1LHO on the repeater, so I'll let him ask his question directly. Okay, so the question was what happened to hose.brandmeister.network. So I believe that hose.brandmeister.network was actually an online way to listen in on the Brandmeister network and Brandmeister talk groups. I honestly don't have the answer. If it's not working anymore, I just don't have an answer to that. I remember listening to Brandmeister before when I didn't have a hotspot. If that's what you're referencing, then I really wish I knew the answer, but I don't know if it's offline right now, what had happened to it. Hopefully that answers your question. So K1LHO, is that what you're asking? Okay, yeah, I wish I knew the answer, but I'm not up to date with what happened there. So are there any additional questions in chat? Okay, so for those of you that are on the Zoom meeting and can see the chat window, you know what KC1 FYI posted. And for the recording, basically Nick had posted that there's a certain model radio that allows you to do both VHF and UHF. And if you get a mobile, you can have 3 decks with 1 remote head. So are there any additional questions from the Zoom meeting?
Anyone on Zoom, please post
All
your
right, and I'm
questions
going to give a shout
via
out to
chat.
everybody that's listening to this presentation via radio. Are there any questions out there in radio land before I move on with the Zoom and presentation and also simulcast on this frequency? All right, nothing heard. This is NU1U. Going to move on in the presentation. The benefits of DMR. It's a commercial radio standard, so it's also an open standard. The combination of those two, especially the fact that it's being an open standard, means that lots of radio manufacturers can build for the DMR standard. You're not locked into a certain radio, so you don't need to get yourself a Motorola specifically. You don't need to get yourself a Yaesu specifically or an ICOM specifically. You can pick out whatever radio manufacturer you want to use for DMR as long as they have a DMR radio. So that's the benefit of having the open standard. It's spectrally efficient, uses half the bandwidth that a FM station would use. The codec that is in it is highly tolerant of bit errors. So again, the computer can hear a lot better than you can with the analog signal. So that's a positive for the usage of DMR versus regular old analog. It's widely supported by a lot of radio vendors, including some that are very cost friendly for what it's allowing you to do. And guess what? Your repeater that could be an analog repeater can only really do 1 send, 1 receive. But because you're using DMR with 2 time slots, you've got yourself 2 repeaters because of those 2 time slots. Okay, now we're at the disadvantages of DMR. It's more complex than the the amateur centric digital modes. So other digital modes might be a little bit easier. As far as difficulty to join talk groups, if you don't have it programmed into your radio, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to get onto that talk group. The Anytone makes it really easy, I've found out, but still, it's better if you have it programmed into your radio first. The radio build quality is all over the place, so you can get some good DMR radios and you can get some stinkers. And then there's a lot of different digital modes. So you want to get the digital mode that other people in your club, in your area, who you talk to actually use. So if you're going to pick a digital mode to use, if you're going to use DMR, hopefully the other hams that you talk to, or the ones that you want to talk to, also use DMR. Okay, so we are in a perfect time to ask if there's any questions, because we're going to go into the practical application of DMR. We've gone through all the nerd stuff. You should now have a pretty good grasp on what the DMR uses as far as frequency, time slots, talk groups, color code, code plug, DMR ID, et cetera, et cetera. We should have full understanding of that. So hopefully that was a good overview of what DMR is. Now we're going to get you into a how to use DMR, okay? So we'll stop there and ask for questions. So I actually think I see a new chat that came in from Togi, K1SEI, and he's asking if I can describe why DMR is useful. He believes it's selected as the area's emergency network through the Hardin, Connecticut state repeaters, and doesn't really see any advantage that justifies maintaining another radio system. Why would anyone want this unless you are in ARES or public service? Okay, trying to figure out what the essence of that question is there. So DMR is useful for a couple of reasons in Connecticut. We have a linked repeater system throughout Connecticut. It uses DMR. There is a talk group inside of Connecticut, which is the Connecticut Talk Group, that allows you to talk on every single one of those repeaters when you key up. So no matter where that ham is in the state of Connecticut, if they can reach one of those repeaters and you are on the Connecticut statewide talk group, you can talk to any other ham that has a DMR radio listening in on that time slot in promiscuous mode or on that time slot on that talk group. So it's good to be able to talk across the state of Connecticut versus on a repeater that is local to you. We're also going to go into the different talk groups that are on the DMR system inside of Connecticut that isn't just the CT statewide one, but really you can rag chew on the statewide if you want to. If there's no emergency going on, why not? The repeaters are set up to do that. Then also you can use DMR on your own personal hotspot, and we'll get into that. But hotspot is basically your own little mini repeater that doesn't transmit very powerful. It's like you can go a few houses down the road and still get onto your hotspot, but further than that, you're probably not gonna hear yourself on the hotspot. But that hotspot connects to Brandmeister or TGIF and allows you to talk to other hams that also have hotspots or that are on repeaters that are linked to that network. So hopefully that answers that question, and I'm going to pause again to see if there's any other questions or if that question was answered sufficiently. Okay, so will areas support hotspots was the question by K1LHO, and the answer is yes, it does with an asterisk. It supports Brandmeister Talk Group 3109, and I hope I'm getting that right. I can actually look it up, but the Connecticut statewide talk group is a talk group that is linked to Brandmeister. So if you have a hotspot, it's on the Brandmeister network, and you key up on talk group 3109, and again, I really hope that I got the right talk group, but you can look it up online on either Brandmeister or the Pi-Star website. And if someone's transmitting on any of the repeaters in Connecticut on the CT statewide talk group, you will hear it on your hotspot if you have your hotspot set up to do that. Let me pause for the repeater. Okay, so I actually had a text message that came in if we're taking questions on Zoom. So if you're taking questions on Zoom, you need to post it in the chat window because I don't have my computer speakers on. And the reason why I don't is because it can conflict with what's going on the VHF station that we have going here. Okay, so are there any other questions on the Zoom meeting? Okay, awesome. So I'm doing a real quick search to see the talk group list for Brandmeister. And let's see. I don't see it there. Stand by. Okay, so Yahtzee, I was correct. 3109 is the correct talk group if you want to be on Brandmeister. All right, so we're going to move on to the practical side of DMR. And so what's the first step in getting on DMR? Go to Radio ID.net. Even before you order a radio, if you haven't ordered a radio yet, get yourself a DMR ID. Because the last thing you want to do is get your radio and then not be able to play with it. So if you think you're going to be using DMR, go to dmrid.net first and then sign up and be approved for your DMR ID. And then the next step is get yourself a radio. So DMR ID, then get a radio. Okay, so this is going to be information specific to the state of Connecticut because we do have a Connecticut Aries DMR repeater network. And if you go in either Google to get to the website or you know the DMR Aries website, CT Aries website, you'll be able to see this map of all the repeaters in the state. And here's the thing with the repeaters in the state, each one of them needs to be programmed in order to access them. So moving on to the different frequencies, there's also a chart on the DMR CT Aries website that shows the entirety of the repeater network. So inside of your code plug here, this is what you're going to need to do if you're going to access every repeater in the state. You need to program in the frequency of the repeater, obviously the offset, and the color code for each repeater. Now, that's only one line for accessing the repeater. And there are multiple repeaters in the state. You need to make sure you get the right frequency, the right color code, and the right offset. Now, remember that thing I told you about talk groups? And multiple talk groups can be on a repeater. Okay, so every single one of the repeaters in the state of Connecticut has multiple talk groups that you can access, okay? There's talk groups that are on time slot 1, and there's talk groups that are on time slot 2. So if you're programming your radio and you want to talk on every single one of the talk groups, or you want to at least be able to have the option to talk on all the talk groups that are on those repeaters, you need to have a line for every single talk group programmed in on the repeater. So we're looking here at, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So there's 10 different talk groups just on time slot 2. Okay, so that's 10 lines in your code plug for one repeater just on time slot 2. Time slot 1, we're looking at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. It's either 18 or 19. I was counting really quick. Different talk groups in time slot 1. So as you can see, programming a code plug takes a while if you're going to be using different talk groups on a repeater. Okay, so I'm going to pause here just to see if there's any questions about what I had just discussed, which is if you go to the Connecticut Areas website, DMR website, you can see where repeaters are located, what their frequencies are, what their color codes are, what their offsets are, and then what talk groups are supported on the DMR network in Connecticut. Okay, so unfortunately, I don't, the question was from KC1 NXP Andrew. What's the status of the New Haven repeater working? I honestly am not up to date with when things are working in the DMR repeater network. In fact, Brandmeister sometimes is flaky being attached to the C bridge for DMR. And even NetWatch, which is the monitoring website for the DMR network, changed its website and it still hasn't been updated on the Connecticut Areas page. So as far as what things work when, I'm not up to date with that. So I apologize, but I can't speak to that. Any other questions? Okay, so it looks like I got a private chat here from K1SEI Togi, and he's asking if I'm going to mention push to talk. So yes, I am going to mention push to talk, and it's actually the next thing that I was going to talk about. So what I have up on the screen for those that can't see on the repeater is, in the state of Connecticut, there are some talk groups that are static talk groups. They're always on. So if you key up on those talk groups, you will go out onto the Connecticut DMR network all across the state. So listed here is the alert message talk group 8900, CT statewide 8901 on time slot 2, and also the northeast region, which is 3172. If anyone keys up on time slot 2 on those talk groups, all the repeaters will hear it. Then the same deal on time slot 1. Anything that is not shown as a UA or PTT in parentheses is always going to repeat across the state, with the exception of the local talk groups. So on time slot 1, time slot 2, there is a talk group called local. It is talk group ID number 9. So that local talk group will only repeat on the repeater that you're on. So if you want to talk to someone and not tie up the rest of the network, you can say, hey, I want to talk to you on, say, the Guilford repeater, and let's talk on the local talk group. Then only the people that are monitoring the Guilford repeater on time slot 2 will hear your conversation. It will not go all across the rest of the network. Okay, so what does UA or PTT mean? UA means user activated and PTT push to talk. So basically what's happening is any other talk group that has that designation, user activated or push to talk, is dynamically connected to that talk group. You will not hear someone talking on that talk group if they're on another repeater and you have not activated the talk group. So let me give you an example. The Middlesex Amateur Radio Club has a DMR net on Monday nights at 7 o'clock. And we do our DMR nets on TAC 3. So when we do our DMR nets, usually the members that are on it are on the Guilford repeater, and they are on the, oh my God, I'm blanking, Glastonbury repeater. So 2 repeaters are usually what we use, and obviously that covers our membership area. So if you want to participate on the TAC 3 net, you need to key up on that repeater if no one else on that repeater is participating on the net. So usually a vast majority of us are on the Guilford repeater. So as net control, we'd come on the Guilford repeater and start doing the net. In order for someone on another repeater to join the net, they have to key up on a different repeater. So usually it's the Glastonbury repeater, and that key up, that dynamic join to TAC 3, that talk group, lasts for 10 minutes. So if you don't key up again on that repeater within 10 minutes, you're going to lose that talk group. So this is NU1U for identification. I'm going to pause here to take a drink. All right, so that being said, when you're on the Connecticut DMR network, again, you will always hear any station who keys up on any static talk group like CT statewide. You will only hear users on local talk group if they are on your repeater. You will only hear like Connecticut TAC 3 user activated or push to talk groups if someone on that repeater has keyed it up within the last 10 minutes. Okay, so that's to keep from having something happen in TAC 1 in Connecticut Region 1, in Connecticut Region 3, and you want to use the same time slot. Well, if you're using different repeaters, you're not going to conflict with each other because that talk group isn't active on the repeaters in different regions so long as no one keyed it up. Okay, so some event happening in Region 1 and an event happening in Region 3, as long as you're using the repeaters in your region, you're good to go because no one's activated TAC 1 or TAC 3 in the wrong region. Okay. So I'm going to pause here for any questions. Okay, so I got No questions via the chat Zoom meeting. We're gonna move on here. So code plugs. This might be a little bit hard for everybody to see, but this is an example of what a code plug looks like. So the Ansonia repeater, if we look at this code plug and it's very, very small, you'll see that from line 1 to line 23 is programmed for the Ansonia repeater. So there's 23 different talk groups for just one repeater. And this is the reason why I say you might want to get the same radio that other folks have, especially in the state of Connecticut, because if you actually want to be able to travel with this radio and key up a repeater anywhere in the state, it's going to take you a while to program every single repeater in the state. So there's a couple things you can do. You can download the code plug that's on the website, or you can ask another ham that's already got the same radio and has a code plug to give to you. Certainly if you reach out to me, I'm good on QRZ, NU1U. I can give you the code plug that I have. It's not just going to have the Connecticut DMR repeaters. It's also going to have like some personal analog repeaters that I have, as well as my hotspot talk groups and frequencies. So I'll just let you have it and have at it. All you need to do is add your DMR ID and some other custom things like APRS messages and whatever else is going to be customized, and I can send you what that is. So that's kind of the reason why you want to get a code plug or a radio that someone else has, so you don't have to do that all yourself. If you aren't interested in using the Connecticut DMR network and you want to go at it alone and you just want to use a hotspot, who cares what radio you get, because you're going to need a custom code it anyway. Okay, so we're going to move on to the DMR user ID database. What you want to do, if you have an 878 or you have a radio that allows you to get a full dump of user IDs from the database and put it into your radio so that when they key up with their DMRD, you can see their name and call sign, you'll want to pull it from the radioid.net website. There are other websites that have region-specific DMR ID, so you don't need to pull the whole database. Some just have the North America, United States, et cetera, et cetera. Those are on other websites, but because I have the Anytone, I just pull the entire list and I download it, or I upload it into my radio. So to do that on the 878, you would go to radioid.net, you would click on user.csv, it'll download that user.csv file, and then you would do an import in your code plug into the digital contact list. You find that file and you click import, and boom, now every single DMR ID, call sign, location that is on radioid.net is now in your radio and ready to go when you start using either the Connecticut repeater system, your own hotspot, or some other DMR repeater. So this is NU1U. I'm going to pause for any additional or further questions on what I've talked about so far. Okay, W1 Lima Victor, you are recognized. What's the question? W1LV, this is NU1U. Okay, so the question was, there's different DMR networks, so like Brandmeister, DMR Mark, TGIF. Are there any problems when you're traveling, mixing and matching with those networks in a code plug, specifically the 878? And the answer is no. You can program any network you want into your code plug. The thing that you want to watch out for is the different talk groups. So different networks will have different talk groups. So the Brandmeister Connecticut statewide talk group is 3109. That's not the same for the actual state of Connecticut's talk group. So the state of Connecticut's talk group, CT statewide, is 8901. So when you're programming your radio, just know that when you are on a repeater for Connecticut and you want to access CT statewide, you need to be on the frequency for the repeater, on the right time slot, which is time slot 2, and you need to be on talk group 8901. And I'm going to break for the repeater. On your hotspot, if you're using Brandmeister, you are going to want to be on whatever color code that you have programmed into your hotspot, whatever time slot you've programmed into your hotspot, and the talk group that is the same talk group in CT statewide for the DMR network is actually 3901. So instead of being on 3901 on Brandmeister and 8901 on CT statewide, because of the way that the C bridge bridges those networks together, you have a different talk group depending on which network you're connected to. So the short answer is you can program your code plug with multiple networks. Just make sure you've got the right information for the talk group you want to talk to on each one of those different networks. Okay, so W1LV, this is NU1U. Follow-up question was, am I going to hear the same folks if they're keying up on Connecticut statewide on the DMR Connecticut network, or if I'm talking on Brandmeister? So the answer is yes, you'll hear the same. The repeaters in Connecticut are bridged on that one, well, multiple talk groups, but specifically that one talk group on CT statewide. If you key up on Brandmeister, you will hear the folks that are on the repeaters in Connecticut if you're on that talk group. If you want to, you can have a hotspot in your car connected to your Wi-Fi hotspot and drive around anywhere in the nation, key up, and you'll be talking on all the repeaters in Connecticut so long as you're on the Connecticut CT statewide talk group on Brandmeister. And that's actually what one of our members does, so that he's got clear reception and doesn't have to worry about what zone he's in, what repeater he can connect to from his car. He just has a hotspot with him. And then he wants to talk on the CT network, he just keys up on the CT talk group for Brandmeister. I hope that answers the question. Okay, so W1LV, there was no additional question, but just to make it clear to everyone, the repeater owner of a DMR repeater can bridge to any DMR network they want to with whatever talk group they want to. So if they want to connect to Brandmeister on a certain talk group, they can make that talk group a different number on their repeater. It's not set in stone what talk group you need to use if you're bridging between networks, okay? You just need to know if the repeater's actually connected to that network or not. So additionally, on the Connecticut Aries DMR network, North America worldwide. Those are in the Northeast region. Those are also bridged to different networks. Same with the TAC stations. So TAC 310 and TAC 311 are also bridged to, I'm not sure if it's Brandmeister, it might be Brandmeister, it might be another DMR network, but those are also bridged as well. Okay, so we are now at the point where we had talked about importing the contact list. And for those that aren't seeing the Zoom meeting, I'm just showing the massive amount of contacts that you can get into your contact list. And it's going to show the ID, the name of the person, their city, their call sign, state, and region. Okay, so now that you have a radio, your DMR ID, and you've programmed a code plug, it's time to get on the air. It's you're good to go. You're ready to start doing DMR. So what I'm showing at the screen now is what I've termed stats for nerds. Essentially, what I've done is I've keyed up on a repeater, both Glastonbury and Guilford, and the C bridge for Connecticut is publicly available at the website shown on the slide. I'm not going to read it off for everyone that is listening because it's just a whole bunch of numbers with a slash call launch. So using my Anytone 878 with 4 watts of power at 36 dBm, hitting the repeater in Guilford, it's relaying my station at approximately a whole bunch of a whole bunch of zeros, 316, which is negative 115 dBm received power. And that's an approximately god-awful amount of digits decrease in power, and anyone that's on the network can hear clear audio. So I'm not very close to the Guilford repeater, and I can still hit it with my HT inside of my house with 4 watts. I can't say the same for analog repeaters that I've hit. And this is on UHF too. It's not even on VHF. And I did all the math. I'm not very confident in it, but I think that it's all right. So with DMR, you're able to transmit farther because the computer can hear a weaker signal inside of your radio. You can still get clear audio. And the thing with DMR is, in all digital modes, is the difference between analog and digital is when you get a weak signal in analog, you can kind of hear the station and you can really hear a lot of static. And it's hard to pick out the voice from the static. With DMR or digital modes, you either get it or you don't. So if the repeater is getting a little bit of signal, but it can pull it out, you're going to hear crisp audio. Then there's going to be a line where the repeater just can't get it anymore, and it's not going to repeat the signal. So with DMR, it's either kind of you get it or you don't. So you're not going to hear the static. It's just going to be audio or no audio. All right, so we went through the repeaters in Connecticut, and I wouldn't want to give a DMR presentation without talking about hotspots, because in my personal opinion, this is the best part of ham radio with a technician license. If you want to do HF distance type contacts without getting a general license, because the internet and a hotspot allows you to reach out to stations that also have hotspots anywhere in the world. So what you have here on the screen is just one of many different hotspots that you can purchase. This is, I believe, a jumbo spot. It has an DVM hat on top of a Raspberry Pi 0W. and you can buy these online for approximately $100, like from Amazon. You can get it cheaper from like AliExpress, but it's going to take months to get here. So if you want something immediately, hop on Amazon, do a search for a jumbo spot. It's going to get you something that looks like this. This one here is attached to your home network via Wi-Fi. If you get a different hotspot that has an Ethernet cable, might be better off audio quality, because this Wi-Fi hotspot only uses 2.4 gigahertz. Or I'm sorry, this DMR hotspot only uses 2.4 gigahertz on the Wi-Fi, which is very, very busy when it comes to Wi-Fi, and you could probably get a bunch of interference. So for one of my hotspots at home, I actually have one that has an Ethernet port. If you want to go at it alone, you can get an MMDVM hat and put it on any Raspberry Pi. I had old Raspberry Pis with an Ethernet cable, plopped it on there, loaded up the Pi-Star software, and was able to get onto the DMR Brandmeister network. So what does that look like? On the DMR hotspots that I personally have used, they run Pi-Star. Pi-Star is, I wish I could tell you who made it. I could probably Google it really quick, but for most of the Pi-centric hotspots, this is the software that it's running. And it doesn't just allow you to use DMR. You can use D-Star on this. You can use Yaesu System Fusion. So you can use many different radios with many different digital protocols, and you can try and bridge them. A lot more complicated, way above what I'm going to talk about tonight. But DMR specifically, you take your Pi-Star, you plug in your DMR information, and then you would also plug in your Wi-Fi information, and then you would plug in your password to whatever network you're connecting to, if it requires a password. So Brandmeister requires one, TGIF doesn't. There's other networks, but those are the two that I've used before. And once it's set up, you really don't need to go into the interface to see what you're seeing here on the screen, which is a list of all the stations that have talked on this, my personal repeater back when I had an older call sign. I'm sorry, not repeater, hotspot, when I had the old call sign. Once you set it up, you can just set it and forget it. And then really what you're doing to access the talk groups is you're programming your radio. So as long as you're connected to whatever network you're connected to with your hotspot, be it Brandmeister, TGIF, once it's set, you're good to go. So specifically what I'm showing on the screen now is connection to Brandmeister. What you're seeing here is my hotspot and a whole bunch of stats. You're seeing who's talking, whether it's me talking on the hotspot, and I don't think you're actually going to see someone keying up on the talk group, but you would see that on your Pi-Star, your hotspot. So if you're on the Zoom meeting, you can see kind of, in one situation here, we have slot details for the time slot, and it shows a bunch of talk groups with a lock icon. Those are static talk groups that I've programmed into my hotspot. So if anybody keys up on any of those talk groups, I will hear it on my hotspot. There are pros and cons to making a static talk group on your hotspot. If someone's rag chewing on that static talk group and you want to use your hotspot, you can't, because it's simplex and you need to wait for them to stop transmitting before you can talk. And if you have a static talk group, then if they key up again, you're in the same situation where you're not going to be able to talk on your hotspot. So use a static talk group on your hotspot sparingly. And if you have multiple static talk groups, If one person's talking on one talk group, and then somebody else is talking on another talk group, and you're trying to talk on one of them, the other talk group might key up, and then you're in a situation where you're not using your hotspot anymore. So you do not need to program a static talk group in your hotspot. And I'm going to pause for the repeater. This is NU1U for identification. So if you want to just use your hotspot and listen in on a talk group, if you key up on a talk group, it will dynamically set a static talk group. So like the repeaters in Connecticut, if you key up, it will listen on that talk group. Now on your hotspot, there's no timeout as long as you've keyed up on that talk group. You will stay on that talk group until you key up on another talk group. I believe there's a 10-minute timeout now, so when you've moved off of that talk group, the other talk group becomes your new dynamic static talk group, and the old talk group will age out after, I think, 10 minutes. You can force that. If you key up on talk group 4000, it will disconnect everything. So you will no longer be dynamically connected to a talk group. And what I'm showing here on the screen is time slots and talk group. Well, not time slots. It says time slot, but it's actually talk group. And I'm going to pause for the repeater. Where I have static talk groups that are in one column and they're all set. Now, on the bottom, you're seeing talk groups where there is locks. Those locks are symbolizing a static talk group that I've programmed in. And then there's some talk groups that have a lightning bolt next to them. Those lightning bolt means dynamic talk group, dynamic static talk group. So what's happening is on the screen, we're seeing a talk group called Weather Watching on the Brandmeister network, which is talk group 31774. And if you scroll over that, you'll see that the talk group was automatically set because it's the last talk group that was keyed up. So that's why it's a dynamic static talk group. You can clear that by keying up talk group 4000. So at this point, this is NU1U. I'm going to see if there's any questions about hotspots as a whole. There's a lot more to hotspots and programming code plugs. I'm not really going to go into that tonight because that could be a whole nother presentation on how to program hotspots. I just want to show you the power of DMR and using hotspots and repeaters with DMR. So any questions for the concepts that I've talked about thus far? Okay, so nothing from the chat as far as questions go, and this is probably the moment that everyone's been waiting for. We have been going strong for an hour and a half now. I think at this point, everyone that's been listening and paying attention and in the Zoom meeting knows DMR. So I want to congratulate everyone who sat through this very long presentation about DMR. There is a lot to it, but I hope it's given you the knowledge that you need to say, I do know DMR and I'd like to use DMR, or you know what, I know DMR and it's not a thing for me. So I guess I'll leave it as, are there any additional or further questions before I wrap up tonight's net?
Okay, anybody in the chat, you want to open it up? You want to ask anything on the chat or possibly on 2-meter repeater?
Okay, so there is nothing heard. I am going to thank, tremendous thanks to the Meriden Amateur Radio Club for allowing myself, NU1U, to present this topic, and also inviting the Middlesex Amateur Radio Club, Middlesex Amateur Radio Society to the TechNet. Again, in 2 weeks from now, there's going to be another TechNet on the 21st, same time, 7:30 p.m. I hope that you all add it to your calendars. I will send out invitations and reminders to our Middlesex Club. And again, big thanks to everybody who participated and watched. I'm going to end the net on the radio here. I will stick around in the Zoom meeting for a little bit longer, just in case there was any additional questions that need to be presented with the visuals there. So thanks everyone. 73, have a great night. This is November Uniform 1 Uniform, closing this Meriden Amateur Radio Club net at 9:02 p.m. this Thursday, January 7th, 2021. 73, everyone.
I'll echo that. Thank you, Ant. This is AB1DQ. Really fine topic, really great presentation, and great slides too. I really appreciate it. DMR has been a mystery to me, and you got me intrigued into it again. Thank you for being our guest tonight at the Meriden Amateur Radio Club too. Folks, Ant will be coming back a couple times this next couple months to present other topics in the TechNet. So thank you for being with us tonight. I just want to say thanks as the coordinator of the net. AB1DQ, back to net control.
Okay, well, I'm going to thank everybody who thanked me. Again, this is one of those topics where I didn't fully understand it, so I felt like I needed to fully understand it. And then once I did, I wanted to share the knowledge. So again, this net is going to be closed this evening. 73, everyone, and hope to see you again on further tech nets. 73, everyone, and you, one you.
Sayonara, people.
Thanks again, Ant. It was a good net.
Yeah, no worries. So Rob, I don't know if you want to keep the recording going for additional questions, or you want to have people ask questions off the record if they're like.
I usually wait till the last person exits.
Okay.
I've recorded the whole thing, so I'll put up a YouTube and I'll include you in the distribution there, so
Okay.
that anyone that couldn't attend, they at least can attend via YouTube and listen in.
Okay. So the only gotcha that I would say there is we should probably let or ask where the heck did it go? KB1 VBR if it's okay to share, only because like half the presentation was ripped straight from one of his presentations. So either I would say we contact him and just make sure it's cool, or we post the link internally and not make it like a public YouTube video.
I can certainly reference KB1 VBR, KB1 Victor Bravo Romeo, and that's
KB9
certainly.
VBR.
What was that again?
It's Kilo Bravo 9 VBR.
Got it.
His website is www.jpole-antenna.com. And he's also got a YouTube channel, which I can post in the chat.
Perfect. Well, we'll reference him and make sure everybody understands a lot of this material was pulled from his website. So that should
Okay.
satisfy that.
Okay, cool. So I guess free reign on the Zoom meeting. Does anybody have any additional questions that go past what all the mumbo jumbo I was talking about earlier?
Can you share your cold plug? Send it to my email, buddy.
I can do that. It's not a problem. So in my code plug, what I have is, and actually I could just pull up the code plug and kind of walk through what the code plug looks like. If anybody wants to see it, let's see. Oh, it might be my laptop, not on my desktop here. But it has different zones. So inside of a code plug, oh boy, please have it somewhere. Uh-oh, it's got my old call sign, so this is gonna be an old one. Let me share my screen anyway.
And while you're doing that, quick question.
Yeah.
I have an 878 with a code plug.
Yeah.
Both analog and then zones with DMR.
Yeah.
Any way to import, like you say, your code plug without disturbing what I already have in the radio?
Nah.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
sorry. Let me, I'm choking on air here. Let me go back. You can take my code plug, load it into your code plug software, and then you can do an export. So where you have tool export, you can export my channels, my zones, and my talk groups. So talk groups, zone, or you can just do an export all, and it'll export everything. And what you'll have to do is you'll have to manually go into those files and merge them. So there'll be CSV files, and you take what's in your
Comma
code
separated
plug
variable.
and put my code plug underneath it.
Okay, one more. Can you simply let me know what's the difference between the Connecticut Mark and then the Connecticut Aries networks available to us?
As far as I know, that's the same. It's the same thing.
Isn't there two different systems in Connecticut? The Connecticut Aries and then that, oh, the DMR. What's the other one for New England? The
Grandmeister.
no, not Brandmeister.
Turbo, TRBO?
No,
Merck and Aries are the same.
DMR. Like you talked about, Connecticut is two different numbers, 3109 and something else. So you have
Okay. So Connecticut Aries is the state of Connecticut's DMR network. So they have DMR repeaters all over the place. The Connecticut talk group on Brandmeister, that's a hotspot. That's, I gotta turn off my camera.
Oh, I know what the other one is. The New England NECDN or something. It's another group
Yeah.
of repeaters.
That would be different repeaters. They might have the same talk group bridge, but I don't know if they're the same. So like Northeast region, maybe that's the same talk group on all the repeaters. I'm not sure.
Okay, so Connecticut Aries is the one most people in Connecticut use.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep. All right. So I forget what the question was about my code plug.
I think Rob wants it.
Okay.
I want it because I got a technical mind, but
Oh, right. So here's the deal with the code plug. This starting at number 1, going all the way through the state of Connecticut, we are looking at. Oh man, went all the way back to the beginning. 789 lines of code for the
Jesus.
code plug. So if you don't have the same radio as somebody else and you want to use all of the talk groups on all the repeaters in Connecticut, you got some work ahead of you.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. I just want to use a few around me that these other guys have.
Yep.
And, I just haven't got my head around this stuff.
Okay, so here's what I have set up at home. Is right here, this transmit and receive frequency, it's the
Yeah.
same thing.
I see it.
So receive on 445.500 and transmit 445.500. That's my hotspot. So I get to set that. You look at the band plan and you figure out where the simplex frequencies are allowed. You don't mess with satellite frequencies. You don't mess with repeater frequencies. You pick a simplex frequency. So your hotspot, if it's the same kind that I got, is transmitting at 10 milliwatts. You're not going to bother anybody if you set up a hotspot in your house, unless you got a ham next door. Your radio, you should be transmitting at low power, because there's no need to transmit anything but low power. Your hotspot's transmitting even weaker than what your radio can transmit at low power. So what I've done here is I've set up my radio. So I have simplex, it's digital mode, my radio ID, time slot 2, color code 1. That's all stuff that you can program into your hotspot. And then my talk group here, I have Connecticut General, which is 3109. If I click on this, I can select any of the talk groups that I have configured for my hotspot or my code plug. So if I close this out and click cancel, and I right click on one of these things and click copy, it's going to copy everything for my hotspot. And what you do is you double click on this and you change the talk group, so that you can just make next line, next line, next line, next line, and then just go in there and change the talk group to a different talk group on your hotspot. So what you'll see here is everything's the same. It's the same transmit receive frequency, but we have Connecticut General, Connecticut TAC, Connecticut Czech, Colorado HD, et cetera, all different talk groups on my hotspot on both.
Got it.
Then,
Yep.
yep.
Oh, I was going to mention that now I'm looking at this programming you're doing for the Anytone. The similar programming for the Connect systems is really entirely different format. I mean, in terms of the bits, you're specifying the same thing, but this cutting and pasting that you did, which is kind of a neat way to do that, doesn't exist on the Connect systems. Although in one case, you can export things to Excel and then fiddle with it there and import it back in if you wanted to do that kind of hacking. But so depending upon what kind of radio you have, that may determine what kind of programming system you have. And this may be entirely different if you get a Connect system or
See you, Joe.
some other one.
Yep. So again, I don't prescribe to telling someone what radio they should get, but in the state of Connecticut, the 878 is the most popular for a reason, because there's a code plug.
That's the Anytone?
The Anytone 878, yep.
Yeah, I got a Teotera 380.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I had a
going to
question
definitely be
on
different.
roaming.
And then if I scroll all the way down the very bottom here of the code plug, oh crap. I have my analog repeaters in here. And this is again an old code plug, so I don't have the Wallingford repeater in here. It's on my, the one behind me here. But that's just in this channel here. That's where you set all of your talk groups, frequencies, color codes, PL tones, etc. That's one section of this code plug software. Then what you got to do is you've got to go and set your zones. So on the Anytone, what's going to happen is you don't want to flip through all those channels. It's going to take you forever. So you want to set up a zone. And in my hotspot zone, if I double click on that, here's all the channels that I have in my code plug software, but I only care about the ones that are in my hotspot. So what I do is I slide the hotspot talk group channels over here and make that the hotspot zone. So I'll key over to my hotspot zone, which is on my radio. I have 80 of them. So I can, push that button a billion times, but realistically, I only use the top, well, on this code plug 3, my hotspot, Connecticut Analog, and Guilford. So if I move between those zones, then all I need to do is spin this top knot dial to get to the actual channel I want to use.
Yep.
So you have channels and you have zones set up in your radio, and that makes it a whole lot easier to use than if you just put everything in one zone.
Seriously, Ed, you've simplified this greatly for me, at least.
Cool. hopefully that makes life easier when you try and use DMR. And what I really enjoy about DMR, like I said, is before I learned DMR, I got my general license. And I thought in order to make contacts long distance, you needed a general license. You needed to get an HF radio. I got an HF radio first. That was a whole another wild thing that I'll be talking about in another month. But if just having a tech license, you can get a hotspot and you can talk to people in Ireland. You can talk to people in Australia. You can talk to people in other states. You can take your hotspot with you on a business trip or whatever. Still talk to your friends in Connecticut that are on the Connecticut repeaters, DMR repeaters, through the
Yeah,
Connecticut state.
that was the draw for me. I did program my Tiatera with a code plug that a local guy that was willing to share it. And Sunday mornings, I was able to talk to guys from other continents and other areas, and it was kind of fun.
Yep.
You know, I understood it was via internet, but it was still fun. It was still fun to talk to guys.
If you like rag chewing, hotspots are great because
Yeah.
you can just key up and say, I'm doing a radio check, and somebody's going to come back to you somewhere on the planet, and then you can just start rag chewing.
Yeah, somewhere on the planet, someone's going to come back to you.
Yeah, you know what? There was one thing that I did not mention in this presentation, and oh my God, there's just so much to DMR. But both on the Connecticut repeater and on Brandmeister and on TGIF, there's this parrot talk group. So if you set a private talk group to this channel here on this time slot, and you talk into your radio, it will repeat back what you said. So you can do a radio check. And most hams know that you can do this radio check with Parrot, but they still want to talk to people on the talk group. So instead of keying up on Parrot saying, hey, I'm doing a radio check, they'll key up on the talk group just to, you know, give a radio check. But really what they're doing is they're calling CQ.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason to do that. You can just key up and do a Parrot. And so what I have here on my radio is, you can't see it, but I have my hotspot right here. I have it set to Parrot. So if I say, this is November Uniform 1 Uniform, testing the Brandmeister Parrot talk group to see what I sound like. This is November Uniform 1 Uniform, testing the Brandmeister Parrot talk group to see what I sound like. So you don't need to do a radio check on any talk group but the Parrot talk group.
So basically you do your own radio check.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. I appreciate you coming over here and doing this stuff for us.
Yeah, no worries at all.
Anthony, I got a question for you about your zones.
Yeah.
Have you thought about in a zone putting all the repeater channels for Connecticut statewide? So if you're traveling across the state, you can switch on to the zone for Connecticut statewide and then turn your channel from repeater to repeater.
You could totally do that. That's actually a great idea. I don't go anywhere. I work from home and my kids go to school from home and my wife doesn't work. So I don't have a need for that, but that's an excellent idea because then instead of flipping down and trying to find it, you just go to the zone for Connecticut statewide that you programmed on your radio. And then when you're going to another zone or not zone, another repeater, just spin the dial on the top till you find Connecticut statewide for that repeater.
There's also this is Andy, KC1 NXP. There's also a roaming feature that allows you to roam from repeater to repeater as you're moving along on the 878. I haven't really played with it too much, but
I would love to know how that works because I don't.
Yeah, I haven't played with it much, but it's supposedly if you put it in, you know, in I don't know if it's the zone. I'd have to go back and look again. Yeah. As you go, it'll automatically get to the closest repeater and pick that up.
I'd love to know how that works. Like, is it pinging the repeaters or is it listening for a signal from the repeaters? Because somehow it's got to actively know that that repeater is around. And that's going to take up some airtime no matter which way you slice it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, thank you. I did not know that. All right, cool beans. Well, thank you guys for inviting our club to join your TechNet. I hope that we get a lot of other things going. I'm definitely gonna ping James about the TechNet stuff. Ed's been good as far as communications back and forth. Rob, thank you for hosting this. I also thank everybody that I've, met from the Meriden Club. Everybody's been very welcoming, especially, guys that I've keyed up on the radio just to make sure I could get to your repeater. It's been a pleasure.
Well, it was a pleasure for us, and I hope you get a lot more topics in the future.
I do. If you guys want more, I can keep dishing it out.
We want more. We like to present everything we can to our membership.
All right, cool beans. Well, then I'll see you guys a couple weeks from now, if not sooner. And then I'll have that presentation ready to go in a month.
All right, cool beans.
Thanks. All right, thanks everybody.
Nice job, Darian.
Thanks, Dave.
Sayonara, people.
Catch it.
Bye-bye.
Good. Hey, Rob,
Good night, gentlemen.
What's up, John?
you got to show that parrot thing to K1LHO. You keep him busy for a month.
You're an evil man. See you later, buddy.
Good night.
Jesus. I gotta stop this thing from recording. Let's see. I'm gonna end it.